Welcome to your Seren Conference Study Skills session, where today we're developing our skills in critical thinking. I am Dr. Claire Harrell. I did my PhD in medieval literature at the University of Birmingham, where I also worked as a lecturer. I live near Cardiff. This is my cat Chaucer, who's named after one of the more famous medieval authors and who was a very good companion while I was studying. In this session, you will learn what critical thinking means, reflect on why critical thinking is important, and practice thinking critically. We're going to begin by road testing some of the assumptions that power our everyday lives and try to strip some of them back. For this first exercise, I want you to imagine that you're showing a friendly alien around Earth. As part of the tour, you fly over a football stadium. Struck by the sight, the alien has some questions. These are the questions that the alien asks you. Why don't the people watching join in? What is a game? What is a team? Why are the people watching more excited than the people playing? Why are there no women playing? Pause the video here for 3 minutes and note down what assumptions or values you had to explain to the alien to try and make sense of the football game. So these are some of the things we think you might have wanted to explain to the alien. So first of all, what a team is and how we decide which team we favour. How and why society distinguishes between the sexes and why we separate them in sport. And even what the issues with this might be. Why people like to belong in groups, so of fellow fans of the same team. What sports are and why we play them. The value placed on sporting skill. Social contracts around being an observer, what winning and losing are and why they matter to us, and how we distinguish between leisure and work. When we think critically, we ask what assumptions underpin this idea, belief, or statement. Is this logical? What is the logic based on? What might the weaknesses in the logic or assumptions be here? Hopefully, answering the alien's questions prompted you to reflect on the assumptions that underpin values or practices that we take for granted in our everyday lives. So, for example, at a very young age, we become familiar with the idea of sport and the value of sporting achievement. And there are a lot of assumptions baked into that about importance. Why do we care about people being good at a game? So what is an assumption? An assumption is something that is agreed upon without discussion. Something that is generally accepted to be true without proof. There are sensible, useful assumptions. For example, if I assume I step off a cliff, I'll fall and hurt myself, and harmful or unhelpful assumptions, such as the assumption that someone will not be good at or interested in something because of their background. To think critically, we need to strip back assumptions. We need to ask what has been proved or not been proved. If a statement of supposed fact has been based on a bad assumption, we need to challenge that statement and come up with something better. And what do we mean by values? These are things that are socially assumed to be important. In this instance, the group is operating under the assumed value that it is important to win a game of sports, and that winning carries importance or value. When you come to approach academic texts, arguments, or data, they will carry assumptions with them and may rest on differing values. Good academic writing is open about the assumptions and values it rests on, its critical background, and shows readers where those assumptions come from in the referencing. We should be suspicious of any text that claims to tell an absolute truth or will not reveal what assumptions it's operating under. So, how can we check that we're thinking critically, and how can we make sure that we're being critical in our thinking, reading, and writing, rather than just taking on and then describing what we've learned? When you come to complete assignments at university, you need to make sure that you're thinking critically and analysing the material rather than just presenting a descriptive report of everything you've read, which is true in every subject. On this slide, you'll see a collection of things that you might do in an essay or a scientific report. Some of these are tasks that are descriptive, and some of these are tasks that require critical thinking skills. Pause the video here for 4 minutes to decide which of these tasks are descriptive and which are critical. So, as you'll see here, writing a short biography of a key figure in your field, summarising research, retelling the plot of a novel or the points of a poem, providing historical context, and describing an experiment that you carried out are all descriptive, whereas the other activities, so identifying issues with an experiment, offering suggestions for how you could improve it, suggesting a new approach to a problem, suggesting new areas of research not covered by the set reading, identifying similarities and differences between two sources, offering your own reading of a literary text, arguing for the need for the research that you're carrying out, applying a new critical theory to an old area of study, and questioning a standard approach to the issue are all critical rather than descriptive activities. So how does this compare with what you came up with? Pause the video for a minute here to identify any differences that you had. Hopefully what you'll see here is that anything that is gathering information or reporting things that you've observed or read is descriptive. Even if you're bringing together what you've read in a summary, that's not critical, that's descriptive. Likewise, if you are describing the basics of what you have read or done, that's not critical. That holds true whether we're talking about reporting an experiment you observed or carried out, right to if you're talking about plots or characters in a novel or play, or even formal features like structure, rhythm, rhyme and meter in a poem. It's not critical unless you have something that is your own original thought to say about it. Of course, you need to start with the basics, but you always want to push beyond that to criticism and analysis if you're aiming for the higher marks at university. The same goes for any kind of background, whether it's historical context or the context of the scholarship, or even describing past experiments and processes. That can only be the beginning because you're just reporting on the work and thought of others. So when are we using our critical thinking skills? When you're offering your own reading of a text or offering your own interpretation of data, if we're talking about STEM subjects, or when you're reading a scientific paper and identifying its assumptions and limitations. Anytime you're identifying similarities and differences between two sources, you're applying critical thinking skills. Anytime you're suggesting new areas for development, so if it's a new approach to a problem, a new way of understanding a text, a new way of approaching a thought experiment or carrying out a scientific experiment. And that extends to identifying new areas in scholarship that have not had adequate attention to date. Of course, no one expects you to do this right away as an undergraduate, but have it in your mind, scholarship is never complete. So if you're doing your reading and wonder about something that seems to be missing, it's always worth reflecting on that in an essay, particularly in the conclusion. Critical thinking also comes when you question the approach to something. Has something always or often been done in a certain way in your field? Is there an assumption that this is the best way? Do you have an idea for how you might view it in a fresh way? All of that is critical thinking. It can be hard as an undergraduate to feel confident stating things that you think have been missed, or problems with established approaches or new ways of thinking about things. But this is your time to try out new ways of thinking, and you should feel free to confidently assert anything that you can back up with evidence. So now we're going to have a look at a popular moral dilemma together and think about how we could approach this with critical thinking. So the trolley problem, which is a kind of famous philosophical problem, is there's a trolley coming down the tracks and ahead there are 5 people tied to the tracks who are unable to move. The trolley will continue coming and it will kill the 5 people. There's nothing you can do to rescue the 5 people except that there is a lever. If you pull the lever, the train will be directed to another track which has 1 person tied to it. So you have 2 choices. Do nothing and the 5 people will die, or pull the lever and save the 5 people, but then that 1 person will die. So pause the video here for 5 minutes and think about what your choice would be, making a note of any assumptions that you're making along the way. Then restart the video. Now take a moment to reflect on what you considered. What assumptions did you make? How did you assign value to the different choices? Did you assume that all lives were of equal value? Did you assume that choosing to act was of a different moral quality from choosing to not act? Did you ask any questions of the problem itself? Was there any information that you wish you had? Let's turn again to the trolley problem, but with a few little tweaks, and see if we can apply our critical reasoning skills to these new problems. Choose one of the scenarios listed here, and then think about what assumptions and values you are using to determine if your initial answer would change. Pause the video for 5 minutes again, noting any questions or assumptions that you come across. There isn't a wrong or right answer to these questions. As with all critical thinking, it's not looking for a simple answer, but these questions are important to ask. We are asking if the basis on which we make decisions is sound, and then what underlines those decisions. Where does that come from? And is there something that we haven't considered that would cause us to behave differently? So we might consider if pushing someone is morally the same or morally different from diverting the track. We might ask if actions have moral meanings outside of their consequences. So are we focused on the result or are we focused on the direct result? So somebody living or somebody dying, or are there other things that we consider? Do your answers change if you know more information about people? So here we've got a worked example. So say we chose option B, the 5 workers on the track are convicted criminals. This is quite a popular variation. And you think about, did your answer change? What did you discuss with yourself? What did you think about when changing it? What assumptions did you go to? Does every life hold equal value? And if it doesn't, why not? Would it matter what the crimes were? So what if they were more serious crimes? What if they were 5 murderers? Or what if they were tax criminals? Or when we think about what is a crime and what is a convicted criminal, what if they were political crimes, such as protesting against an oppressive government? We'd have to ask ourselves, does a criminal conviction mean that someone's life is less worth saving? Why might we think that? Why not? And how does a convicted criminal differ from somebody who breaks the social contract in ways we don't punish by law? So, for example, people who are unfaithful to their spouses. How do we know that the single person who we're pushing in front of the tracks, or who we're diverting to save in favour of the criminals, hasn't also committed terrible crimes, but they just haven't been caught for? So these are all the things we would have in our mind if we were approaching this problem critically. So why is this important? How will the trolley problem help you to be better scholars and argue more effectively in every discipline when you're at university? Well, in all subject areas, thinking critically, questioning assumptions and asking probing questions of the way things have been done in the past allows you to make inroads into new knowledge. In English literature, it might allow us to question an established reading or understanding of a text and to see it in a new light and discover new ways of seeing or interpreting what is written. In philosophy, to challenge old ideas or see them in a new way. In economics, to forge new, innovative strategies. In medicine and biomedical science, to overcome old problems in new ways, to use established methods in new areas of study, and to discover and test potential new therapies. At its core, critical thinking is about questioning what has come before and making sure that we don't simply accept things because this is the way they are. Scholarship and academic study are alive and ever-changing because students, lecturers and professors are always asking these questions and always challenging assumptions. So let's reflect on this session. In this session, you learned what critical thinking means, you reflected on why critical thinking is important, and you practiced thinking critically. Just as we close this session now, take a couple of minutes to write down one assumption you identified today, one bias you identified today, and one assumption you'll look for in your work in the future, in the reading and the scholarly material you come across. I hope you enjoyed that session. Thank you so much for your attention, and I hope you felt like you gained some good critical thinking skills.
Wel, mae hi wedi bod yn noson dda. What an insightful evening it's been, and thank you to everyone who has contributed this evening. Gobeithio i chi fwynhau. I do hope that you've enjoyed this first evening of the National Seren Academy Conference, and you found it inspiring, and that you are ready for even more tomorrow. Yfory felly, nôl fan hyn am 6. Tomorrow afternoon we'll see you back here at 6 p.m. where we'll hear about the summer schools planned for 2022. And more information, advice and guidance. Beth fydd yn digwydd yn yr ysgolion haf tybed? Bydd mwy am hynny, a mwy o wybodaeth, cyngor ac arweiniad yn dilyn yfory. Felly, diolch o galon bawb am heddiw. Thank you all for your amazing contributions. Tan yfory, till tomorrow. Nos da. Good night.